I mean it? Yes, I do. Okay.
Meetings.
You're live and unmuted.
Thank you. This is Community Board 2 Manhattan Landmarks Committee, the second of two meetings for the month of May. And we have one application, and at the business session, we will finish an application that was adjourned until today for more information and discuss the resolution. The first application is 144 Spring Street. Oh, I should say for the public, the applicant is well experienced, so I won't go into that part. But for the public, anyone who wishes to speak after the presentation, will please sign up on the form that's being put into or has been put in to the chat. And Susan, for this one, I think we'll do the new system of the public first, and then Dana, and then us.
Okay, got it.
Okay. So when you're ready, if you'll put up, Cass is up.
There. I need you all to actually, if you don't mind, just add David Kubik from BKSK Architects. He'll be making the presentation with me.
Who's that, Cass?
David Kubik?
Yeah, Kubik. David.
He's got his hand up, yeah.
Good. Terrific.
Here we go.
Right.
Hello, everyone. Share my
Nice to see you all again.
Oops, sorry. Here we go.
Great. Okay. You ready for us, Chenault?
Yes, please.
Okay, very good. Good evening, and nice to see you all again. Cass Stackelberg from Higgins Grace Barth and Partners, and David Kubik, partner at BKSK Architects. David and I, again, will be making the presentation together. I'll begin with giving you a little bit of background and context, and David will take you through the design presentation. So great. Chenault, as you mentioned, the project site is 144 Spring Street on the southwest corner of Spring and Worcester Street. It's a 20-foot by 80-foot lot, now currently vacant, and vacant since the late 1940s when the building on that site was demolished. The project we're presenting has been calendared for public hearing at Landmarks for June 9th. And the overall scope of work is to develop a two-story commercial building on this site. And the commission approved a building. Let's go to the next slide. The commission approved a two-story commercial building back in 2014, which was basically an all-glass facade, taller than what we are proposing, but a two-story. And that approval expired in 2020. And this project team is taking a very different approach to the design of the corner. The program will be the same. It will be a retail development, but a very different approach, and one that we think draws perhaps more directly on the history of the district. Obviously, the building that was approved also drew on the ideas of transparency and light transmission, which are key to the historic development of district. But I think what we're proposing is perhaps more sort of directly related to that. So let's go to the next slide, which is a rendering of what we're proposing. As I mentioned, this is a two-story commercial building, perhaps similar in scale, a little bit shorter than what was approved previously. But this building, as designed, really draws in a very different way on the rich history and essential themes that are integral to the significance of the Soho Cast-Iron Historic District. So David and his team have been looking at the way building technologies were at the forefront of the buildings, the historic buildings that make up the district, the ideas of structural innovation, and how those innovations found their way into the buildings of the second half of the 19th century. Daylighting as a key component of historic architecture for industrial, manufacturing, commercial uses, and sort of integrating that into the design. And then I think perhaps most significantly, The application of what's referred to as UHPC, ultra high performance concrete. It's a concrete structural system. David will take you into much more detail. It can be pigmented, so the color is integral. But in many ways, it's very similar to cast iron in the sense that it is structure. It is the structure of the building, but it can take decoration in the same way the cast iron was made in molds. UHPC also is made in molds and can take decoration. So it's a forward-looking material in terms of its application. Obviously, concrete has been around for thousands of years, but it's a formal, forward-looking application of that material, but one that draws on those historic themes seen in the district. Let's go to the next slide. So obviously, you know the site. It's an important corner site on Worcester. It's been vacant, as I said, since the 1940s. Blank side walls of the Federal House to the west and the lot line of the loft building to the south. Next slide. Just sort of looking at the corner. So this is the northwest corner of Spring and Worcester Street. An early row house from 1818 on the corner, with a commission-approved extension in 2010. And as the committee knows well, there have been a series of approvals for fairly contemporary infill buildings, low scale at 2 stories, but also much larger scale buildings throughout the district. And this ensemble sort of is an interesting dialogue with one another, but right on the same intersection as a project site. Next slide. Now on the northeast corner, this 1896 store and loft building, heavy masonry articulated with classical motifs, with cast iron infill at the ground floor and some of the piers and mullions that divide these large, tall bays. And on the southeast corner, in 1890, let's go to the next slide. An 1890 industrial building, actually built for the Metropolitan Telephone Company, designed by Cirrus Idlets. Similar in the sense it's heavy masonry with cast iron elements. And as I'm sure the committee knows, most of the Soho Cast-Iron Historic District is actually comprised of masonry buildings. There's cast iron integrated into many of them, those that even aren't cast iron fronted buildings, but the majority of the buildings are actually masonry fronted buildings. Next slide. Some just 2 tax photos just to highlight a couple of things here. So the photo on the left, circa 1940, about 3 years before the building was demolished. It was a corner building. It was part of a whole row of federal style houses from the first quarter of the 19th century. And the photo on the right, looking down Worcester Street, you can see the tail end of 144 Spring Street. And then by 1940, there was a 1-story extension off the back of that building on the back portion of that lot. Next slide. Looking at 2 historic maps that I think sort of illustrate the evolution of the district. 1862 on the top and 1911 on the bottom. In 1862, this block bound by Broome and Spring, Worcester and Lawrence Street, now West Broadway, bookended by rows of federal style houses. But in the center was the sort of introduction of this new set of manufacturing uses that one sees in the district, lower large snuff manufacturing. So that occupied the majority of the block. And then by 1911, with the development of these through block lots between West Broadway and Worcester, you have these very large scale loft buildings, and really just the northern part of this block with these smaller scale houses that remained, and as it does today. Next slide. So looking at cast iron architecture, the Badger catalog, which was published in 1865, was really sort of this sort of marketing genius, Daniel Badger, finding a way to sort of sell his product. And one of the best calling cards was the Howat building, obviously on Broome and Broadway, which had been built about 10 years previously, and speaks to the application of sort of classical architecture and cast iron sort of fitting together, the way cast iron in its early days really was meant to mimic masonry, and then sort of went almost sort of manneristic after these early buildings in the 1850s and 60s. But this idea of newness is really sort of integral, I think, to the district. This idea of this sort of new technology, the application of this technology to street fronts which just prior had only been basically masonry. The notion of prefabrication, where these pieces were constructed off-site and then just assembled quickly on-site, which obviously allowed for accelerated construction. And that I think fits very nicely within the scheme that we're presenting tonight. Next slide. And then just a couple final images here. This image on the left is also from the Badger catalog, which shows kind of a storefront sidewalk and lower vault area. And then the images on the right, cast iron and glass vault lights on the upper right, and concrete and glass vault lights on the lower right. And the ideas of light transmission as being so integral to the architecture of this district. Vault lights obviously were about bringing daylight down into basement levels to make those spaces rentable, sort of productive spaces. And the ideas of light transmission and this sort of lattice quality that you see in the upper right is really sort of important to some of the thinking that went into the design of the new building. Next slide. The commission has approved a series of, as I said, very contemporary buildings throughout the district. Just a small selection here. The back of the Scholastic building at 130 Prince Street with this very sort of heavy industrial expression. 150 Worcester Street, which is a project that BKSK designed 15 years ago that was not built, but it too used this high performance, ultra high performance concrete as part of the facade with ornament and detail cast into it. As I said, the commission approved it, but it was not built. And then 151 Mercer Street, sort of a different take on kind of an industrial expression on Mercer Street. And similar to these multi-story commercial and loft buildings, let's go to the next slide. The commission has approved a series of smaller scale structures, 1- and 2-story buildings, which really speaks to the commercial nature of the district. So this is a collection of commission approved buildings going back to the late 1990s up until earlier this year. Just to give the committee a sense of the sort of range of treatments and approaches: masonry, metal and glass architecture, the Shiguro Bond addition on 110 Prince Street with a peaked roof. So a wide range, and the commission has embraced a wide range of treatments, particularly for these smaller scale buildings. Next slide.
So I'll pick up here. Again, I'm David Kubik, one of the partners at BKSK. Good to see everyone again. So just to dive a little deeper into the design, but to touch on one project or one address that we looked at a lot here at 101 Spring Street. I think what we were really fascinated with in terms of the history of the technology in the district is that, again, as Cass said, when it began, the cast iron elements were designed and proportioned to really mimic traditional stone facades. But as it evolved and people became more comfortable with the technology and wanted to innovate and push the boundaries, you started to see much more unusual proportions, things you might not expect in traditional architecture. And this perhaps is the culmination of that, where you can see on the ground floor, you see the tallest and thinnest column, whereas on the top floor, they're the shortest and widest, almost inverting what you would expect structurally. And that's really all due to the new innovative cast iron material. The other thing this facade exhibits really well is that it's kind of an exoskeleton, right? The actual structure of the building is the cast iron that you see, and that it's sort of sitting in front of the window and glass line. So the glass almost appears like it's slipping behind this skeleton structure. And really what that means for us is just in the history of this is that it really sort of evolved and changed, and it almost created its own unique style, departing from any sort of traditional execution. And in the designation report, it even has language about, its own sort of peculiar sense of beauty, a peculiar sense of style. So it was a real evolution, kind of a real journey. And as we start to think about our project and some newer contemporary materials, we also want to think how the innovation could evolve. So as Cass said, the facade is mainly composed of UHPC elements, ultra high performance concrete elements. They have a great ability, because the concrete is so strong, to introduce pretty fine, well-detailed textures and patterns in the material itself. It can be cast into these smaller textural patterns and panels. So you can see some examples there on the left. Also, one of our projects here on the right, 16 East 16th Street, also a landmarks approval just west of Union Square. That's also an ultra high performance concrete screen that allows for daylight to pass through. And then lastly, again, because the material is you see is also the structure. We're working at Queens Botanical Garden on a sort of concert bandshell structure in that material. And again, what you see is the structure cast all as one solid monolithic panel. Again, looking at the Badger catalog, there's really great, interesting examples of geometric repeating patterns used in different ways. They might have been lattice panels like you see on the right, or on the upper left, but these patterns were also used at many different scales. So you'd see them in smaller lattice patterns like this, perhaps spandrels on buildings, but they were even used in bridge construction, like you can see on the lower left. But just really beautiful, interesting geometric patterns that were able to be used in this new material. More examples on the upper right, where that patterning shows up in sidewalk vaults, like you saw in the photos earlier. Even on the lower left, again, larger industrial type projects like grain silos, we're starting to use some of these patterns. And then the columns themselves would take on classical forms, but even beyond that, you'd see interesting geometric patterns repeating on these cast iron columns. And because cast iron in its sort of nature to be cast allowed for this really beautiful sort of relief embossed pattern on all of the elements, and you could get really creative in the design. And as we started looking through all this, we also noticed something else sort of in the background, which is, even the graphic standards at the time, the graphic techniques when trying to document these pieces, had a sort of style to themselves where there was often this sort of crossing grid pattern used to express form and cast shadow and light. And you can see in these examples when you zoom in, there's this sort of common technique of the kind of warped crisscrossing pattern. And then as you think about it more broadly, that drawing technique was used at the time, even in banknotes and currency. There were, these special machines to create this really highly intricate, detailed patterns. You can see it in this stamp, same graphic technique of that grid warped pattern to create form. So as we turn closer to our design now, here again is that corner rendering. So you can see all of the sort of dark gray elements there are the UHPC prefabricated elements. So columns and spandrels and beams, all prefabricated and bolted together on site, just as they would with cast iron. And then there's a separate, window frame installed with a transom panel in each bay. You'll see that the first floor is proportioned a little bit taller than the second floor, just to kind of give a little bit more grandeur to the ground floor expression. You can see here on the left, we actually organized the bays and introduced kind of a double column here at this line, which sort of lines up with the original urban pattern and depth of the historic building that was here before. So it's just a little subtle recognition of what was there and the pattern at the time for where buildings were and yards were. And the upper addition lines up with that line as well. And then just as a crown on the building, extending that pattern up to a parapet spandrel panel to finish the building and give it a little bit of a termination towards the top. And then again, these spandrel panels, both at the ground floor and the second floor, have that pattern and are perforated, which allows for some light to transmit through them, like the rendering is suggesting. So again, bringing back some of the qualities that you see in the district, both on the building facades or the sidewalk vaults, trying to celebrate the technology and how it can let light transmit. There's one main entry here on Spring, and then two other entrances here. We'll go through a little more detail. So here's a blow up of the Spring Street elevation. So you can see here in the section on the left, as I was describing earlier, that these UHPC elements are sort of floating in front. So it really is kind of an exoskeleton building. There is no additional structure behind it. So the facade really is the structure. And then there's a simple storefront that's installed behind it, integrating this transom panel as part of it. And you can see on the columns that there is a similar pattern, but it's much more subtle. It's just a minimal embossing or relief on the column. It's only like less than a half an inch, whereas the spandrels are deeper and perforated. So you get a little bit of difference between the primary structure and the infill spandrel panels, similar to what you would see in other examples in the district. Here are just a few images of some of those spandrel panels that you would see in the district with their, really interesting repeating geometric forms. They were playful, they were inventive, they would take on many different shapes, and they had kind of a nice abstract quality to them, I would say, right? They're not trying to be super traditional or classical. They're meant to be a little bit geometric and abstract. In terms of color, I think it was interesting exploration as well. So as we look through the storefronts in the area, you'd see kind of two different approaches. There's often a deep tone to the storefronts, like dark grays and blues and greenish blues. Sometimes you'll see everything painted one color. Sometimes you'll see the primary cast iron frame a color and then the window sashes a separate color. It's sort of a mix. You see a little bit of both. And what we're proposing is to have all of the UHPC this sort of bluish greenish gray color with a bronze color for the window frame and signage panel. So there's a little bit of a second tone, but a primary reading with the gray tone of the UHPC. Again, just a line drawing and just to take it off rendering for a minute so you can sort of see where the pattern is and where it's not. You also find like a lot that the ornamentation would show up on the columns, but then it would get a little quiet on the spandrels. They were sort of seen as almost like the infill between the ornamental elements. So we take the opportunity to let these spandrels be a little, these sort of like beam-like elements to be a little bit more quiet, and then let the pattern show up on the spandrel panels when it's in front of the glass. This is just a diagram again to explain the prefabrication technique. So just as they would in cast iron, the intention here is to have the columns be prefabricated as elements bolted together to what's called here panel number 2, which would be the spandrel. So you get these nice tight joints on either side of that column, and then the spandrel panels infill from there. So it really will be prefabricated and brought on site and erected in that manner. And this obviously is just a 1:2 scale 3D model to just show you the kind of intricacy you can get with this material. It's part of its kind of beautiful qualities is that you can cast it and get all of this detail in a really refined way. Just some more details up here on the upper right is a plan detail through the windows showing a typical column with the spandrels kind of floating in front. It's a pretty small column, about 8 inches by 8 inches, because the concrete is so strong. Again, similar to cast iron, we can do slender, thin profiles. And then a section through the spandrel itself or through the beam itself where you're bolting everything together and you get those kind of minimal joints on either side of the column. And then a section at that spandrel panel and the floor beam connection, just showing how the glass kind of slips behind just behind the concrete. Similar details on the left. This is a detail at the column when the floors connect to the column. We're also just showing the flag sign, which would happen at the entries that you saw in the rendering. And then we are introducing some subtle uplighting at the columns. So there's a small circular pin light at the bottom of the ground floor column, and then a small linear uplight at the second level, which we can show you again in elevation. And then again, just a blow up of how these elements interact with the window system and eventually become the parapet at the roof. So this is just a little diagram to show that lighting like we were talking about. So these little circular pin lights right at the sort of foot of the column, there's a little spot there right at the base that these can be installed. And then these little 1 inch by 1 inch uplights at the second floor slab to uplight those columns. So it just gives a kind of soft glow on these concrete columns to just sort of celebrate them at night. And you'll get a nice reading of the relief and the pattern that's embossed on them. Just a long elevation here. You can sort of see ghosted in the back is the neighboring building. That's actually a party wall. So in some ways it's both our neighboring building and kind of part of our building. And you can see how that line lines up with the double column registration on the main facade and the partial rooftop addition or structure on the top. Just a few plans for reference. As Cass said, this is a two-story commercial building, no tenant identified yet. So the cellar has some retail storage, some utility rooms, first floor, second floor selling space. Up on the roof, there's just a small little gathering space there and an occupied terrace for the retailers to use as like for special functions. There's an elevator that comes up, the fire stair comes up. And then above that is just the elevator overrun and a few small pieces of mechanical hidden behind a mechanical screen. Just an overall axonometric view, just to explain what you were seeing in perspective. So again, you can see the entrances here, flanked by their flag signs, the roof structure there with the occupied terrace, the elevator bulkhead, and the mechanical. There's also an egress door at the very last bay where the fire stair exits. And we can finish here with the overall rendering.
Okay. Happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we're going to the
All
public.
right, thank you. Susan, can we go to the public comment now?
Yes, we're gonna go to the public now and then we'll go to the committee questions. Mark, do you have?
I can do it too.
Okay, great. Okay, if there's anybody from the public who wishes to speak, we're doing it in a slightly unusual order today, so please raise your hand. All right, Chenault, it doesn't look like anybody from the public actually wishes to speak, so take it away.
Well, but Dana would not be here for this. So if there are no members of the board, then we can go on to the committee questions.
Okay. I think Bo had a question. Bo?
Yeah, well, at least one, I have a couple questions, but
Speak louder.
could you explain the lighting that you have proposed to, when you described it was to sort of, I guess, emphasize certain elements of the structure, but I believe it's outside lighting that you're proposing to, and this is the second time, I think it was you who proposed something else just the other day, and I am somewhat concerned about, we're gonna make it, I don't want to make the area look like Miami. I mean, what is the point of all this outside lighting on the, I mean, I don't know if it's all this, maybe it's very subtle, and maybe I'm incorrect that it was who proposed the other one, but would you explain what the outside lighting is that you are proposing?
Sure. Yeah, and actually in this view, you could sort of see the locations maybe even better. So if you look at the ground floor near the sidewalk here, you can see when the column reaches the base, there's a little sort of foot to the column. And right on top of that would be recessed a small little circular pin light. So you'd get, it is pretty subtle. This is not like meant to fully illuminate the facade. You just sort of get like a soft little glow. Maybe it makes it halfway up the column and then you sort of stop perceiving it after that. So there's a round pin light at the base of each column. And then on the second story, in a similar location, right where I'm hovering right now, right on top of that ledge, there'd be a little LED light there doing the same thing, uplighting the column. And really it's just meant to celebrate the really nice textural quality of the pattern on the column at night, and just kind of celebrate the architecture a little bit, and just make it feel special, make it feel celebrated.
But could you say that about any building, about any new building or any old building? I mean, somebody wants to put lighting in to celebrate their project. That's fine, but where does it all end? I mean, I'm very concerned about this, and I don't think this is something that we should, I think it's a dangerous territory to get into.
Yeah, I mean, I would say also for this project in particular, you know, as we also think about those sidewalk vaults, like the photo we were showing earlier, I mean, the base of the facade would often have this sort of soft glow uplighting just by the nature of the lit vaults. So,
But that's what it was.
That's not true.
That's what it
Sorry?
was. It's that's a completely different thing. But if you Cass explained what that was for, and we understand that, and you let the light into the basement, and that's fine. And then if the basement at night is illuminated, then some of the light comes out. But that's a functional thing. That's what happens. You are purposely putting a light outside the building to illuminate the building. I think that's outrageous. And not unnecessary, by the way. Forget it, outrageous. I don't think it's necessary. You know, if you like the building, it's fine. I don't think you need the lighting. That's my opinion.
Did you have any other questions?
Yeah, the other thing is, you know, it seems to me this, and I know there are other examples all around. I've seen them around, and I'm not opposed to a modern look in a historic district. This looks like neither fish nor fowl to me. It looks like it's a little Disneyland looking to me, frankly. It looks like, you know, there are other, Cash showed some of the buildings in the district that are ultra modern, some that were approved and not built, some that were built, and I get that. This to me looks like somewhere in between that doesn't fit into either, frankly. Either the old traditional look or a new modern look. I don't get this, frankly. That's just my opinion.
I'm happy to actually address that, David, if you don't mind. I mean, I think that, you know, the commission has approved a wide range of new infill buildings throughout the district, some that are meant to look old, some that clearly are new, and some that are somewhere in between. And I think you know, the larger scale buildings that I showed earlier are probably somewhere in the in-between spectrum. And I think, you know, what we're aiming for is something that is an interpretation of the historic, but doesn't look old, and it doesn't necessarily look like a, you know, bold contemporary modern building. And I think that's the sort of benefit of this design, is that it sort of fits somewhere in between. It takes its references from the historic, but it looks new. Like, you wouldn't mistake this for a historic building. This obviously is a very contemporary building, an all glass building, and these have kind of a sort of a mixed flavor, particularly the two Mercer Street projects. So listen, I mean, it's aesthetics and everybody responds to things differently, but I think the goal here has been to sort of take the ideas of the historic and filter it through this new material in a way that feels both contemporary but with a historic reference. And I think that's one of the assets of the design, not a negative.
Okay, thanks for that, Cass.
Sure.
Brian.
Thank you very much. I always appreciate these presentations. I have to agree with the previous speaker about the board member that said, you know, something about it. It seems like a foreign element, as much as you've tried to bring in these historic references. It just comes off as a foreign element. But I'll focus on some specifics. There's goes all over the place. Let's start at the top, where you don't go all the way to the property line with the non-occupied structure on the roof. And I was wondering what made you draw back from the adjacent property line wall?
let me jump to the plan. I think I understand what you're asking. It's really just the nature of where the fire stair comes up, um, in terms of the upside versus the downside and how we can turn it. This just allowed us to keep it back from the facade and turn it efficiently around the elevator and then have this room. This rectangle, just from a code point of view, cannot be more than 33% of the roof footprint. So we're trying to just keep it modest and efficient with the stair and the elevator configuration.
Okay, so on the section that shows the roof lines, I don't see a floor line indicated. You've got roof lines, but no floor lines, and I'm wondering what happened there.
On this, I'm not sure which one you mean.
I think on all of the sections, and probably there too, if I could read that tiny printing.
Yeah,
See,
so the top of slab for first and second floor are here. We have a 14-foot tall floor to floor for the first floor. And then there's a roof slab, but then there's sort of an elevated level where the roof pavers would be installed. That's why there's sort of two levels here. So the actual pavers you would walk on would be at this slightly higher level. But we're just shy of, we're right around 13 feet floor to floor for the second floor.
so my question is, why
As you
isn't
can
there
see
a
there.
floor line indicated
I think
for
it's
the
on
It's-
each one of
interior,
these. It's there.
interior space?
Yeah, like, so that's second floor. And then we're just calling this roof penthouse. It's not a third floor, it's the roof, right? It just has that occupiable penthouse. But it would be at this level.
Okay. All right, next question. You can keep that up.
Sure.
The panel number 4, which constitutes your parapet wall above the roof,
Uh-huh.
seems to have such a delicate top rail that it doesn't feel right. It seems like that should have something more substantial. That so that's just a comment on the visual take of that. And then down below on the lower left-hand corner of this indication, at the second floor roof line, all your sections show that the panel that's just slightly above the floor is solid. And yet all of your elevations seem to indicate some kind of a open lattice work. And
Yeah.
doesn't seem to make sense because there's nothing behind it. Solid behind it.
Right. Yeah, no, it's just kind of where you cut it. You're right. Maybe that's a little misleading, but the elevation is what we would intend, where you are seeing through that. You can see the window mullion just behind it. This window mullion right here would be right behind it. So you would see through that first starter course, if you will, as well as the piece above it.
Yeah, I was also confused by the fact that the solids of the exterior framework, I'll call it, don't line up with the floors or the spandrels. It just seems like we're introducing grills in front of clear glass, and we're introducing grills in front of solid walls or solid end of slabs. And so it didn't seem to match up. And that was rather confusing in that respect. Also, what you show, I would assume that there's going to be another presentation, maybe when you have a tenant, for the actual signage. Right now, we've got signage everywhere. We've got the entire elevation on both elevations, just a running band of signage plus those banner signs. To us, that is excessive. We feel that is not appropriate for a historic district. And
Yeah, and so what we were trying to do here was to emphasize the signage on the lower level. So it is in all of these bays, as you noted. We only included it on these 3 bays above this entrance on the second floor. So most of the second floor doesn't have it. The short elevation does. And so some of that grew out of what we were looking at in other areas. We found, examples where you very simply in the transom of the window have a repeating sign. So it felt like something that was of similar scale and conceptual approach to what we were seeing nearby. That's kind of why we organized it that way.
Well, that's true. Certainly riding around and looking at the other buildings, you do see those as you picture. But look at the proportion of signage to the facade. It's much less because of all of the masonry and the other aspects. It's not really as continuous as you're showing it, with very narrow columns interrupting continuous signage. And also, how are you lighting those signs? Are you also downlighting from that band as well as uplighting the upper portion?
No, there's no specific lighting. I mean, they could backlight those if they want, per normal staff approval guidelines. Or they could just have them as pin mounted letters. So I think I wanted to show, yeah, like this, right? Per LPC guidelines, and jump in, Gats, if I say it wrong, but I believe if a tenant were to come with their signage application, these letters could be pin mounted and backlit, but that would be the limit of what they could do, I believe, right?
Right. So it's an opaque panel onto which the letters are mounted,
Yeah.
but you can have a halo lit letter. But there are limitations on the amount of them. So the staff wouldn't approve halo lighting in each bay. Can we also, David, can you just run up to slide I think it's 14 too. And Brian, just to your point about signage, I mean, I think, even on smaller scale buildings like the one that the commission approved last year at Broadway and Canal Street, much larger scale signage in every bay. And I don't know if the committee supported that application, but for these sort of small scale commercial buildings, once these, and I think our letters are called out at 9 inches. I think those are twice that at least. So
yeah.
Yeah, I remember that one. A little different situation, but well, and I wasn't here for the.
Yeah, understand. And it's a different context, but still a much more, I'd say, assertive signage program there. But
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that this site was approved with a glass box with no articulation at all to relate to the historic district. I would be surprised if this committee would have said, yeah, that's okay. But anyway, that's not what we're dealing with right now. So the uplights that you're along the band at the second floor, is that continuous? Because in the section it's shown at the outer edge, which means it's visible. You're seeing a light, even though it's 1 inch, you're seeing that as an element on top of this other material and ledge. And that seems like that would be strange.
So it sits on top of the ledge here on the second floor. It's only 1 inch by 1 inch, and you can paint it to match any color. So you're not seeing the actual lit surface. That would only face up. So from the street, it'd be very hard to tell that that's there. Obviously, at night you'll see the effects of it. But the fixture in and of itself is quite small. It's just this extrusion, 1 inch by 1 inch. And then again, the pin lights are down here at the ground floor base.
Okay, so it's almost seemed like a foot of a column.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's not continuous across the whole facade, it's just at the columns themselves.
And it's really meant to highlight the kind of textural quality of the columns, which is obviously integral to the design.
Okay, my last point is thank you for clarifying that there is an egress at the stairway. which was not shown on your plans. So I was looking for it, but I didn't see it.
It's just, it's this stair here and this door in the last bay.
Yeah, I think our package didn't show a door there. So
Oh,
thanks for
okay.
clarifying.
Sure.
Oh,
That's all.
okay, thanks, Brian. Sean and then Anita and I have a couple of, and then Arturo and I have a couple of questions too. So Sean, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I have about 6. I agree 100% what Bo said about the lighting. I haven't heard it much being said in recent months, but like a hallmark of a building is that or of an element within a building is that it should not draw attention to itself. And this is what these lights are doing. They're drawing attention to themselves. And historically, the lights were never intended to be uplit. The reason those glass vault lights were put in pre-electric in order to let sunlight down, not to let light up. So the whole hypothesis that these reflect a historic character just is not accurate. It's not historically true. You're just drawing attention to your building. And I'm going to ask the committee when we go into executive to really strongly reject this lighting. And the same with the signage that Brian mentioned. Do you know, Cass, the Chanel signs, for instance? Did they get approval? Because there are a lot. I have a whole list of signs that I want to report illegal in Soho. People are just putting signs up. Were they approved? That Chanel sign, or
I think the
was that
signs
rolled by Chanel? Did they just do it?
I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I don't think.
I think the one the one above was, and I think the lighting behind the Chanel may not be, but I do think that you can get a dimensional letter in a transom at staff level. So anyway, I'm not sure about the lighting component.
It just seems there's a lot. There's not so many buildings that have so much signage. So again, the signage is next to signage, next to the lighting. What else do we have? Oh, I have 2 questions, but then I'll go back to the aesthetics. Why are you not using cast iron? Is the concrete just cheaper? Nothing wrong with that. Why aren't you using cast iron? Why this new element? This.
It's a little difficult to do something faithfully in cast iron like this. I think we were also interested in this material because it has some of the nicest qualities of both the masonry-based architecture that you see in the district as well as the cast iron, right? So when you look at this material sample, I don't know if I can find it so fast, but the UHPC has a really nice soft, masonry texture to it. Which it is beautiful in and of itself. And so it relates nicely to the masonry materials that you see in the district, but then at the same time, it can accept all of this pattern and weaving perforation like cast iron could. So to us, it was almost like the next chapter in the evolution of this technology. Just like cast iron was very new at the time, this is sort of another new material innovating what we can do in a similar way in which cast iron did at the time. So it feels like perhaps, the next chapter in building technology.
Okay. Why only 2 stories? Why not build 4 or 5?
From a commercial point of view, if it's a commercial building, right, it's just retailers will tell you, just after the 2nd floor, no one's really walking up that high. It just doesn't make, good viable sense to build a commercial building that tall. You do it more of a mixed use building at that point and do offices on the upper floors. But and then the reason why that's not happening is, it's a very narrow, small site. So there's a real challenge to how much space you're dedicating to fire stairs and core. So you'll see we can do 1 fire stair instead of 2. As soon as this becomes a 3-story building, there's a whole nother layer of codes that would kick in.
Right.
And it would the loss factor would just go way up. So it's just sort of the good combination of planning to do it.
Yeah,
a
that was
two-story.
the response we got a few years ago on the other two-story building. It makes sense. I was just curious.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
It's
No,
also
it's a good question.
there are very few 3- and 4-story buildings in the district. You next see very tall 5-story buildings, sort of cast iron fronted tall 5-story buildings, but that zone of 3 and 4 is kind of an in between.
Or even 5. Yeah, but again, it's okay. I was just curious why you didn't.
Yeah,
So
sure.
it was code and reasons, I guess. Huh? And so on. Okay, what next? Oh, the roof. Did you say there are going to be functions up on the roof? You didn't. You said the employee.
It's more like, like employees can go out there for lunch, that kind of thing. It's not going to be like actual selling space. But, if you have that roof terrace, it's nice to be able to, offer a little place for tables and chairs for employees to maybe go out, sit outside for lunchtime, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll just tell you, there's a building down on Howard and Broadway, and they wanted a rooftop usage. It was a club.
Yeah.
Up until 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, and it became really down heavily on that. So when you said there's going to be rooftop activity, I hope it's not going to be at midnight. No, it's not a landmarks question, but I'm just worried. I'm just bringing it up now for future reference.
Sure.
Okay, what else? Yeah, also, I like the bulkhead on at the base on the ground floor, but it seems unnecessary on the second floor. Just makes it look busy. Talking of which, it looks, you're right, it looks like a 19th century British Victorian stamp. And I just think it's way too busy. Too many curlicues. Less is more. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Sean. Anita, I think you were next.
Sure. Well, I don't know. I think I just want to step back and look at the building in its proportion, its repetitiveness, and I think it's lacking the rhythm that the streets have in Soho, which are sort of, double bays of windows, and then you've got some nice heavy masonry. So you have a rhythm. This is just the infill without any, without the strength of showing the structure. I think also the first and second floors are much too similar in height. To me, it almost feels like it's upside down. The top railing is so oversized, whereas the way the building meets the ground is undersized. So those are really striking to me. I think the material is very interesting, and maybe I could imagine using it in a way that doesn't look like it's bolted together steel. Somehow the material, it's like a first draft to me. Take it one step further and let's see if we can't get some material that vary or express different materials. It looks temporary to me. It's like we could fold it up and move it for the expo or something. And I guess, and then I'll be done. I think the issue of not representing any alignments really with the adjacent properties or the adjacent neighborhood. The storefront has no cornice, so it's just sort of wiped clean, flush. And these are things that would, doesn't take a lot. It's a nod, but it does help. And I don't think that this is just something else. So, thank you.
Arturo, please.
Yeah, I have a few comments. Well, I'll plus one some of the things that have already been said. I have a question on the color. Could you go back to the color and the swatches that were shown? I'm kind of curious, when you compared it to, was it 109 Spring or 101 Spring?
This photo is 101 Spring on the upper left. Yep.
Right, 101 Spring. How does the color that you selected relate to that one?
Sure. It's pretty similar, as you can see. And I guess to back up, when we thought about the color, we were looking around at a lot of the storefronts, and not always, but a majority of them tend to be on the darker side, like charcoal grays or almost nearly black or like bluish green grays. And then, upper part, of a five-story building might be lighter in tone, but the storefronts tended to be on the darker side. So we wanted something that had a nice deep tone to it, but at the same time didn't get too dark because then you really start to lose the reading of the detail. So there's a number of different examples of this kind of greenish gray, bluish gray color throughout the district. So this sample here you can see is very similar. It's maybe just a touch bluer, but very, very similar as we rendered it here.
Right. Yeah, because when I was looking at some of the comparisons and what here is slide 33, a lot of those darker, more accentuated colors usually stand in contrast to like a lighter masonry or a lighter facade. So that's where I was kind of getting a little bit lost with that darker comparison, because that usually was accentuating like a door or the frames of the windows. And so I actually thought 109 Spring was a little bit more, a bit of a kind of a lighter, more suitable comparison when you do this uniform color. Secondly, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the UHPC pillars. So this is the close-up that you had of the pillars. You have that slide, I'm trying to find it, where you can kind of see the impressions. I think where yes, this one where you showed the bronze detail. I think when you really get close to it, it really falls flat. I think, and this is like a comment that also Anita made of just like the flatness of the building in general. And I don't know if it's a limitation due to the prefab material or the UHPC, but I think it's in a way these impressions are not very impressive. There's kind of a lack of detail and just it leaves you wanting more. It kind of just looks like random polka dots. And so it would be nice to have a little bit more history or culture in that material. Along those lines, again, I think to Anita's point, the lack of a cornice or for that first ceiling, that first roof, the lack of a belt course. So that's a term I Googled.
Storefront cornice is what they technically call it.
A storefront cornice.
But that's good.
Yeah, in the spirit of the neighborhood, I think again the flatness of the building. If you look at it from one side, you would just see a long flat wall, and I don't think that's in conjunction with the historic corridor. I think that would also add a lot more detail and just paying respect to the district. Same thing on the lighting. I think last meeting we had this. I don't get where this lighting is coming from. I don't really see it also being an element that's needed in these historic corridors, in these historic districts. So I would also say, nix the lighting. And then one maybe thing that hasn't been commented on yet is the bulkhead roof and why that space is necessary. If you go to the angle, the street view, it just seems very obvious that, this giant penthouse and bulkhead are sticking out. And I wonder if it would be a little bit more, less visible, at least, if that rooftop penthouse wasn't there and just the bulkhead for the elevator was there. Not, the most critical thing, but I think it is visibly a bit of a distraction.
Or even built into the building itself, give it a third floor in part of it and emphasize maybe, again, creating a differentiation between the front and the back.
Thank you, Arturo. I have a few questions. I'm curious what your inspiration was, what your particular inspiration was for the decorative motifs that you chose for this building. I mean, we saw the sort of abstract connection between the Badger catalog and its spandrel patterns and all of that. What was specific about your proposal that, you know, where was your inspiration for those particular motifs?
Yeah, I think we just appreciated the sort of scale and intricacy that you would see on a lot of these patterns. So I think this page probably is most relevant. And so you can see a lot of times, you know, the patterns are sort of weaving in and out in sort of like a lattice-like manner, just by the nature of also how it has to be made. And then again, looking at some of the other examples in the district of these spandrel panels in between the piers, they have this kind of textural, smaller scale, repetitive like pattern. And they tend to be a little abstract. They're not meant to be, you know, super traditional. They're already feeling a little abstract and modern in their geometries and in their patterns. So we were looking to draw inspiration from that and create a pattern that could kind of change and respond to the pieces that it's on. I would also just say, like, when you look at something like this, the columns still have pattern on them, but they tend to be much more subtle so that you know, or here on this pier, there's recesses, you know, on the fluting on the pier there, but it's a little more subtle. And then the spandrel panels tend to be a little more exaggerated. So what we were doing was something similar where the primary frame, it reads a little bit more subtle. The pattern is not very deep, and it feels more solid. And then the infill panels or the spandrel panels are more open, more perforated, allow for light to transmit. So at the end of the day, you still feel the primary frame of column and beam, and the infill panels feel like just that, like infill. Even at the parapet, the column does extend up, so the piece that's in line with the column is deeper and solid, and only the panel in between the columns is thinner and perforated. So that's, and you can see the pattern, there is sort of a connectivity to, so when you look at, if I scoot over here a tiny bit, if you look at the column, your eye can almost trace the arching of the grid feeding down in through the columns up through the piers to the second floor as well. So it's meant to feel sort of like it's morphing and changing and continuous and kind of abstract over the different facade elements.
Yeah, no, thank you. It still feels like an abstract connection to me. I was just wondering if there was something really specific. And, you know, to your point, there is this sort of movement in this that's almost like a vine or something coming up. And, you know, that's something new. That's not something we see, you know, in these kind of Badger catalog type examples. So was there any particular specific kind of an inspiration, or was it a more abstract?
Yeah, I would say you're right. The movement, the idea that it's kind of moving across the different components was something new that we wanted to bring to it in a sort of new, modern, slightly more abstract way than what you would have seen in the late 1800s. But in terms of the pattern, we feel like the pattern is actually very specifically rooted in these examples. You know, we're not literally lifting this pattern, but I think our pattern, you know, feels very similar in terms of scale and repetition and detail.
Yeah, no, I can see that. Also, that room on top, how visible is that from the street?
Yeah, I think this view captures it best. So
So it's quite visible then. That's what I thought. I just wanted to confirm, that. I want to talk about the lighting for a moment. I find myself in the strange position of having supported your lighting on Bleecker Street on Thursday night and feeling very differently about the lighting using the same type of, lighting instrument on this building. And I'm asking myself, why do I have such a different reaction? And I think part of that is that the Bleecker Street building is substantially a masonry building. This is already a predominantly glass structure, so it's already going to have a lot of glowing from within at night. So I think in terms of the like solid to void ratio and all that stuff, it's a very different visual story here. And I'm just, so I don't think it's analogous. And I think I was one who introduced the word, celebration of the architecture on Thursday, but this doesn't feel the same to me. And for the reasons that I just described. So there's that. Also, that building is, this building doesn't have the opportunity to be a historic building yet. That one is celebrating historic architecture. I think we're like, however many years ahead of ourselves on the celebration part at this point, because it's a contemporary building that is, nodding to history, but it is still a contemporary building. Also, it just seems like it's on every column, right?
Correct.
So there's also a scale difference. So I'm not sure. Yeah, it just doesn't read the same way to me. And it feels more attention grabbing here than it does on Bleecker Street. And given the kind of subtlety of the ornamentation on the columns, I'm not quite sure really why it's needed. I know that's not really a question, it's a statement, but if you would like to just talk a little bit more about, why you want this lighting, I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to add to that. I would say basically, it's about just having the project really sort of sing visually at night and just again highlight the kind of beautiful textural material that's there. I know our client is just really interested in trying to make a building that people admire and they think looks great and feels special. And that sort of subtle little uplight on the columns just, brings the building, in a slightly different life at night and just makes the design kind of pop a little bit more.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody else on the committee have any other questions or comments?
I'll speak when everybody's finished.
I think the committee is finished. I also think we should give the public one more opportunity before we close this out. But if you would like, but Chenault, why don't you?
Go ahead with get the public first and I'll sum
All
up.
right, so I'd like to give the public one more opportunity to speak if anybody is interested. So if you are, please raise your hand. Okay, once again, nobody's got a raised hand. So Chenault, go ahead.
Okay, can you put this image, the full screen?
Sure.
Just, we can see a little more.
Yep.
Oh, up just there. Okay. Since we're just talking about the lighting, I'll speak about it first. What I like about this building, I couldn't decide at first whether it was hanging this on the front of a glass building or doing something behind it. And it's something behind it. We're glimpsing through this interpretation, if you will, of the historic elements, if not building, to something very new. And that's what the building is clearly about. And that would seem to be the very reason, just looking at this picture without a lot of intellectualizing, that it's a reason the columns should not be lit. People can look at the columns during the daytime, or if they're really interested, they can use their the lights on their cell phones. But this is giving it a great identity, and clearly it's going to be somehow lit at night, however softly. So that's the reason that lights are bad on the column. The spandrels, what I first thought when I saw this was they're taken from the very ones that are used to mask a ventilator or some sort of air access underneath the windows and to the lower floors. And this seems to be pulling it up and exaggerating far too much. At the ground level, it kind of has that historic reference, and above it just becomes a busy decorative element. The rooftop version, that's a good deal higher than all the others, and it seems to make the building top heavy, because those three things are the boldest that we have, and they're properly proportioned for the windows, and then at the top it's just overwhelming. Is there not a requirement that this be set back?
No, there's no requirement to set it back.
I mean, it is set back. I mean, Chanel, if the volume on the roof be set back?
No, I think you meant
railing.
the parapet.
Oh, the railing, sorry.
I'm more familiar with it on smaller houses. How far is it set back?
Just to be clear, you're talking about these parapet panels, right?
The railing at the top, yeah.
So this is in line with the facade, right? So the columns just come
Right.
straight up, and
That's
the
what I'm
infill panel.
questioning, whether there's not some requirement that it be set back.
No, no, there's no requirement to set it back. I think we also just wanted to give it a little bit of, heft at the top to really have a real formal top to it, so it doesn't feel like a building that just got cut down, right? A lot of times you either see a cornice, or on traditional buildings you see a smaller cornice and a parapet above that. So I think it's actually good to have some real dimension up here to visually terminate
I
the building.
understand the purpose of it.
Yeah,
Just giving my view of it.
sure.
Of the alignment, I rather like the rooftop addition, which is not a rooftop addition. It's something built in the here and now, and it's not being apologetic the way they seem to always be required to do on historic building. The commission are very sort of riven with the fact that you have to be very, very clear that it's not historic, and this fits with the building nicely. Anita's point about not meeting the neighbors very interestingly is well taken, and particularly that there's no termination that I can see at either place that it meets another building. It's almost as though we're invited to think they go into the other building, and it would seem to me just to have a heaviness or a straight through column kind of thing at those two places would let us know that it really is the end of the building, that it's not just sliced off of something bigger. And finally, the point that Anita made about the proportion of the first and second floor, it seems like an excellent opportunity to make something of a second floor, and that it's just upside down. Give it more of a piano nobile feeling, and that's a lot of what one notices first, particularly from a distance, the fact that there's this important second floor. So I would suggest that. I'm finished, Susan, if everyone else is as well.
Okay, if last chance for anybody to, no, all right. I think that's it then, Chanel.
Okay, thank you. And thank you all for the presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Can we go back to the room picture was?
Okay.
Um, we've reviewed this is for the Charles Street.
So we're moving to Charles Street now,
Review the
yes.
material. Is the applicant here?
Yes, Mike Rossani was the
Yeah.
applicant.
And I think we'll have questions from having whatever was sent. There was not a second mailing, right?
No,
People only got one mailing from the applicant.
email on Friday. Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Hey, good evening.
okay.
Hi there.
Susan, you ought to begin with everyone there.
Okay, we're talking about 164 Charles and,
Oh, just to state what we're doing.
well, we're in a business session now for 164 Charles.
134.
Sorry,
Yeah.
134. Sorry about that, 134 Charles Street.
And the reason we're here is that we were had reservations about the patterning, I suppose we'll call the configuration of the windows.
Yeah, there were a number of concerns that were raised on Thursday. So I had some time on Friday to speak with the owner, as well as today after the email on Friday afternoon with some additional questions. So I have some more information for you, and I can pull up the presentation, which we added a few things to.
Great.
So one of the questions was raised about the entry door and the sizes of those doors. So I did verify that we have a 3-foot door on the left side with a 2.5-foot door on the right side. So they're similar in scale, but they do meet egress requirements and ADA requirements for the doors. And then another
And
modification.
say again, please, why they're not two equal doors.
The opening isn't wide enough to have 2 equal doors that would be code compliant. So we have like a 5/6 opening, and if we had 2 smaller doors, we wouldn't have one leaf that would be compliant.
Okay, thank you.
Another concern that was raised at the hearing last week was the pattern of the side windows, and that they seemed a little bit too busy. So, I posed this question to the owner of the building. It was like, is there any specific reason on why they were, they had so many divisions, which was similar to, it was basically copying the existing conditions where you can see there's very narrow panels of glass in between these windows. And if we can look at both of those elevations, you can see that. So we went back and we revised the pattern of the windows on both facades to eliminate some of those divisions to have more equal squared off panels, which is more in keeping with what we're showing at the front of the building. I corrected some of the drafting concerns that were mentioned in terms of the operability and how the windows actually pivoted. So we corrected that. And then going to some of the questions that were raised in the email, you had asked for some actual photographs of these Forster windows, and unfortunately it wasn't enough time to really get anything from them directly, but I was able to go to their website and pull out some images that they have of this Unico XS system. And you could see some of the elements are similar to what we're doing in terms of the solid glass doors and side panels at the rear facade, the multi-paneled windows and doors that we're showing at the front. So this gives you a little bit of sense of the quality and how these products look, in real life. And then the other question was related to other buildings in the neighborhood that had similar types of windows. And, I spoke to our client this morning about that. And I was like, so give me more information. Like, how did you come about this and what were you thinking? He was like, honestly, I live in the neighborhood, and when they did 145 Perry Street, he really loved the way the windows looked in that building. So he was like, we basically contacted them and said, who did you use? And that's what we went with because he really liked how that building came out. So we have some photographs of that building, which you're probably all familiar with. But these are the same type of windows that we're looking to utilize. And then we looked around today as well, just for some other buildings that had similar types of industrial windows that were, tilt and turn operability, some casements, things like that. Just to kind of give you a sense that it's kind of a typical thing to see in this neighborhood, these industrial type of windows. So, any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Mhm.
What is the dimension of the dividers? The buttons, I guess they call. What is the dimension on that?
I'll show you. I think those occurred more in the.
Because they look heavy to me. That's why I'm bringing it
No,
up.
they're not heavy at all.
But that would be important to know.
I'm just trying to find the right sheets.
Do you have
Oh,
any details of the frame?
I do, and I think I pulled them out of this set. This is a different set than I showed you last week, but I can open up the old one and show there was a number of sheets from the manufacturer that I included previously. So let me open that up.
Yeah. Well, it'd be good to know exactly that dimension.
Yeah. Yep.
And I see a lot of stuff here, but I don't see that.
All right. So here were the actual manufacturer shop drawings for the windows. So if we get a little bit closer, we can see, so it's about 0.39 inches is that centerpiece. Yeah, I should have took an overall. It's about 2 inches. That's the mullion size. 1.97 inches.
2 inches?
Yes.
Very big, 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 big.
I don't think so. I mean, 2 inches is pretty small.
Well, it's big in a
And so
wood
the size of the
window,
building.
and it's big in a steel. So
These are aluminum windows, though.
I know. It would look nice if it looked like steel, at least fake it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's I think one thing we noticed, today when I was walking around with him was just that, you do see a lot of the, these types of windows in the neighborhood.
I don't know what I'm looking at.
Well, are there other questions that need answered?
These were the same Forster windows that we're proposing at 145 Perry, and obviously I don't have a tape measure on these, but they seem to me similar in scale.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there other questions, Anita, you or others?
Arturo or Bo, do you have any other questions?
No, I do not.
Eugene, do you?
No, I don't.
Brian? You're muted, Brian.
We can't hear you.
Yeah, he's reaching.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, there he is.
I don't see very much difference in the presentation, so my questions from before would still stand.
Which are
Okay. The the symbols for which way the windows open seem to be reversed on some of the sheets. I think you're wanting to do awning windows rather than hopper. And
Yeah, these pivot from the top and open at the bottom.
yeah, some of the drawings show it the opposite. And
I don't believe in the current set they do.
the current set, well, I
Well, this, like I said, I didn't provide this new set of drawings to you. So this
Oh,
I can,
well, we don't have them, Brian.
yeah, it was just completed this afternoon. So
Brian, you're
I can,
simply asking that the drawings reflect what's been described. Is that it?
yeah, and they have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of these were shown backwards last week at the rear. These were shown upside down as well. So those were all corrected both on these large elevations and on the smaller drawings.
well, that's good. Well,
Yeah.
then,
And I'll send this to you right after this meeting. I'll send you this presentation so you have it. I'll send you the link to the Dropbox.
okay.
Okay, if there are no more questions,
I have none.
then I think we're done.
All
Okay.
right. Thank
Okay,
you
thank
all.
you for coming back.
Have
Yeah.
a good evening.
You too.
All right, bye-bye.
Shall we then do the first application? My notes computer's gone to sleep. Okay, Del, can we put up the picture, the picture that we saw, the rendering that we saw? Does anybody have it?
Do you have it?
Eugene, you're usually the expert on this.
The render.
I think it would just be helpful for our discussion.
The first page.
134?
No, spring.
Right.
Somebody's doing it.
There you go.
That one.
Yeah.
That one, yeah. Can you get it bigger, bolder?
Full screen.
I had a lot of problems with this.
Okay, well, we have it. Okay, just to go through the, if you will, complaint notes, the lighting on the columns. What I heard was that we want to recommend denial.
That's what I
Yeah.
heard.
Does
Yeah.
anyone
I think that-
object
I
to?
think we're all in agreement
Yes.
on that for all the reasons that have been previously stated.
Especially, I just want to point out a big difference from Thursday to this.
I need to get a better mic, please, a better position.
Sorry. I wanted to point out a big difference between the lighting on the Bleecker Street project and this one. The one on the Bleecker Street is illuminating the surface of the brick.
Right.
So it's a very soft, it's textured, it's not a bright light. And there's nothing like this in the glass department. This is a
Right,
big,
that's what I was saying, too.
illuminated.
Yeah, it's not analogous, really.
they're different.
Yeah.
So I think the other one, it was very subtle and nice, and I don't think this is the same in any way.
Yeah, and I think another difference between this and Thursday is, on Thursdays, it was limited to the ground floor, I think, and the top floor.
Just the second floor, actually.
Right. Okay, yeah, but it's limited to 2 floors out of a number of greater floors, and this is, it's basically every bay
Yeah.
is
The
lit.
multiple is just frightening.
It's terrible.
The spandrels,
What is your question? I think this building expresses a steel structure in a concrete material, which is.
well, we first, there was question about the design of them. And the other
Surface?
question is whether they should be in all 3 places.
It seems like they're taking a minor or secondary design element, because in their examples, this is like an element that's kind of on the panels, but here it's it's kind of everywhere. I mean, it seems like it's very in your face.
Well, let's go floor by floor. The ground floor.
I think we need to talk about the general proportion here, and the fact that, there's this very large decorative parapet, and then on the street level, there is the smallest sort of, for want of a better word, bulkhead, and that there's a strange kind of upside down
Yes.
quality that is not really consistent with the cast iron architecture that it is inspired by and replicating in this concrete material. So it is a little bit mind-bending in that sense, and I'm not sure that our minds are being bent for a good reason in terms of the proportions here.
I said it less elegantly that it was top heavy, but we're saying the same thing.
I think that the material is interesting. That's not an issue for me, whether it's metal or this cement material. I think it's fine. It definitely looks upside down. It just looks upside down. If you look at the bulkhead at the bottom at the sidewalk, it's disappearing into the ground, and up above, it's upside down. I mean, I'm shocked by this, frankly. I mean, anybody's entitled to, like and or dislike whatever they like, but as far as a contribution to the district, I think this is not right. I just don't think it's right.
No, I also really object to it's just plain monotonous. It's relentless.
Yes.
It's boring, if you really want to call it out. I think everything could be used, but in a rearranged way where it was divided up more, so it had some kind of a rhythm and a little more permanence. It feels very like it could float away with a balloon,
I think that's a really important point, because it feels, it's this kind of exoskeleton, right? And it feels almost like it's some sort of a collapsible box of some sort, or a collapsible cage of some sort. And the fact that it doesn't have a sort of resolution that with its neighboring buildings is part of that problem, I think, and the proportion is part of that.
And no weight to it.
Right.
I think they show these beautiful examples of the columns getting wider, and then there's a base. And of course, I don't think anybody here minds interpretation, but it's just not even ignored. It looks like the top sort of cast iron on the top of a building, one window, and then it's just repeated in every circumstance. And I also think it's really a problem when you don't mark. One of the consistent things in Soho, even in the old row houses down the street, is there is a storefront cornice. It separates the street. Just because this is double story doesn't mean you need to say that, frankly. You could still create a storefront with a cornice and some weight to it and some variety to it, and then do something smaller, low, they're almost identical in height. And that's not something you ever see, ever.
The top floor looks bigger, actually, than the bottom floor. It does.
It's too big. It's too big, and the other one could be bigger if you want to do it that way, but they shouldn't be the same.
It's upside down.
Yeah, well, it is in terms of the cornice size and the flimsiness of the base compared to the second story base.
Right.
Because there you have the expression of the floor. Here, the floor is at the street level. So there's a lot of problems with it. I also think that these two blade signs on each door looks like like a horse's baffle. You don't need both, just one will work on each door.
Right.
It's repetitive.
Well,
And the
can we try to
color
do
is-
some concretizing of all of this?
So to speak,
Um,
concretizing.
back to the spandrel, meaning something I can write. The spandrel question, there was a lot said about the design. Would they want to, what do we want to say about the design of them? Taking just one section. Or
I
one
deny
section.
it.
I would deny the whole thing.
I don't like it. I think it's a missed opportunity. I don't even think they're terribly far off, but I don't think it's now.
I think.
So
this-
you want to recommend denial of the entire spandrelness throughout?
The whatness, spandrelness,
Spandrelness.
if you want to call it, yeah.
It's
whatever.
on 3 levels. Are we recommending denial of the lot of it?
Yeah, not of the material, not of the I like the invention of that. That's all pretty cool. I think it could be taken a lot further, especially if it's a precast, like a repetitive element. It could go a little more wild, but you know what I mean. And also, I think that the militant gray, it's too much, it's too depressing. Not appealing to me. It looks, it's almost like a subway, or I don't know, I'm getting the vibe of something very,
Old touristic.
yeah, it's
Well, it
kind of,
kind of help.
Yeah, that's-
The
Like
fact
a-
that it does create a kind of cage, like a.
it's like a cage. It looks
Yeah,
like a cage. That's exactly right.
But
golden
just to
cage.
second your point, I don't hate the spandrels. I think I kind of see where they were going, but I think the proportions, right, the thinner to the largest, and there's just they were trying to copy the bulkheads of Soho on the bottom first floor. I kind of see where they were going, but it doesn't work.
Well, it doesn't work. No. it doesn't.
On the positive side, I think there's some things that are positive here, and I think that I really want to speak for everybody, but speaking for myself, part of the frustration of evaluating this is that it could be something really exciting.
Right.
It's an opportunity using some of these concepts, this contemporary use of materials, the concrete subbing for, resonating, the concrete currently at this moment as a translation of what cast iron was back in its day, it's exciting and it's interesting. And I think, there is an attempt to acknowledge the rhythm of the cast iron architecture, but it's off, so I think it's so much like close but no cigar, and it's not there. I don't mind. I think the concept of taking inspiration from the decorative spandrels of the past while being like slightly gimmicky. It's I think if it were proportioned differently, we wouldn't be
So
objecting to it.
And if it was in New Orleans, I probably liked it even more.
Well, there's the other
Because it's a-
aspect of the movement of the decorative.
Well, it's like a filigree,
Yeah.
which is fine. Again, that it doesn't work in its, wait, again, I think if we just added, this one could use addition as opposed to subtraction.
Yeah.
More rhythm, a little more solid in parts. And more alignment. It is a historic district.
If the spandrels were even as different as translucent rather than transparent, if that would help.
You mean
Assuming it can be
the
kept.
base? In general?
No, that instead of seeing through them, that they glowed a bit, if you will.
That might help.
That would help.
And if the proportions were taller on the ground floor and the ceiling height was smaller, it's one of those. Everything has to be adjusted in kind, not just one move.
Agreed.
Well, I guess one thing we want to say is, do we want to recommend flipping the proportions?
Improving the proportions. You can't flip them. But yes.
Right. Taller in the top and lower on the ground.
I mean, I think they got the gist of what we're saying. We don't have to design it, but it's
Right.
too monotonous, frankly. I'm just surprised. It's like the same thing, 2 floors, 13 windows, plus another 13. That's 26 identical bays. That's a little much.
Too much, it's too much.
And, it's almost like the kind of thing where it's people want windows, but then they just hang up the curtains in front.
Right.
It's like we do need to have some solids because it looks good. Forget living well or being comfortable. But we could ship them out all over the country. I would definitely suggest denial.
Yeah, let's just deny it.
Definitely suggest what?
Suggest to deny it.
Of the spandrels as a concept. I just didn't.
The whole project.
No, what we've just been saying. One thing is to get into the details, of which I love, but right now I can't get past the overall. I can't get past the just the overall repetitiveness of a good idea taken too many times. So I would say come back.
Yeah, that's what I said.
I think, if we were going to succinctly have a reference point for what is essentially bothering us, I think it might be the concept that this reads as a glass box with a decorative structure on top of it. Is how this.
And it doesn't relate to Soho at all.
And that doesn't,
Right.
and that sort of, elaborate piece of jewelry over a glass box. I don't mean to belittle it. I think that's a little unfair. But you know what I mean. I think this idea of this decorative structure on top of what reads as a glass box is problematic. And that concept connects the kind of what Anita is describing as monotonousness of the rhythm. That concept also encompasses our problems with the resolution and with the neighboring buildings and with the concept of general concept of proportionality as it relates to the classical cast iron architecture from which it is on some level drawing its inspiration.
And you don't see gray buildings in Soho. You see gray infill. You see the wood and the wood frames, and they can be many, but they're always offset by the enfrainment of the masonry. And then there's a contrast, there's a warmth to it. Here, we skip the warmth part. I think we've said enough.
Yeah.
And to be certain, Soho buildings have repetitiveness, but with maybe 4 or 5 bays.
Yeah, you divide it up in a couple of useful, people like to have an identity of the store too. It's kind of cool where you pick up, oh yeah, I'm in the second bay or whatever. Your eye is is giving you so much information already. Here, everything's the same, so you might just walk by. I think it's better for retail.
What's this? What's this? What's this?
Yeah, well, these bays are very powerful, and they're carrying a big masonry building above it. And so a little gray goes a long way, the infill, the cast iron, it's expressed differently. But here it's, I'd almost like to see the concrete expressed as one color and the fake metal expressed, to express it in more ways than one. But I'm going to be quiet now. I've said my piece.
I'm trying to get an overall what we're saying. We have to say come back. We have to say why.
What else can we say?
The repetitiveness, the coloring and as a detail, the using cast iron elements, but doing them in
Injustice.
I think we're saying in ill proportioned.
Well, the proportion of the whole building.
Interpretation of the code.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would add a general flatness. I think I forgot who said that it kind of reads like a first draft of it's missing all the angles, the parts that stick out.
And it doesn't have any intermediate.
And there are any number of details that are too clean lined to the point that they look like they're absent. The way I mentioned the two sides not terminating, the spandrels, the bulkhead spandrels look as though they sink into the sidewalk.
Right, exactly.
And it's not that hard, you do have to respect your neighbors. And if you do, you probably get a richer design. Look at the one on the white one. I mean, there's a lot going on there, pretty exciting. You could really get a lot of bang, but I think the point is that it should express a ground floor and an upper floor and not two ground floors.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, or two identical floors.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I wrote. I feel so smart.
Yeah. And there are some things I like. I mean, I like the way that it becomes sort of like a segmented arch. All of that's kind of cool. I like those shapes. I think there's too much. It's too big. I think the glass is just too big and not enough meat.
And then are we commenting on the penthouse rooftop addition?
I would make it part of the building somehow. I don't know if you're going to have that big a thing. Also, it's really brutal on the adjacent building. I don't know if the building goes all the way back, but right now that's a backyard. And then they built like a 3-story addition on top of it. But I think we have so many other problems that that's maybe not the biggest one.
But while we're discussing that, Chenault, I want to say that I disagree a little bit with what you were saying in that, that sort of way of thinking of a rooftop addition as being one thing and not trying to mimic the building underneath makes sense when you're talking about a period historic building and you're not trying to fool anybody that the rooftop addition is anything other than what it is, which is a contemporary thing. But in this case, the whole building is contemporary. So I think that way of thinking about that we often think about rooftop additions doesn't actually fit this particular scenario.
I also just think it's gonna be so egregiously visible. I mean, I think this image, once you're there in Soho, you see this building, you see this giant, just like mechanical concrete extrusion, it loses complete context of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and this is such a difficult lot from that point of view because there's no place to hide. You have all that exposure.
Yeah, but they don't, instead of having 3 stories over there, they could just put it on the whole roof. They don't need a roof deck on there. I mean.
Well, yeah, that's what we said that already, but I
know.
mean, that's a biggie. They have to sign on to that.
Right, of course.
But it's, yeah. Well, one of
All right, so
several
let's
things.
just. That's
We're
it.
done.
That's it. That's enough, isn't it?
Bo's done.
I mean, how much? Talk about beating a dead horse.
I know. I think we're done, Chanel.
No,
I don't want
It
to,
could also be the required bulkhead.
I don't want to be so mean, but if I keep going, I'm getting tired.
Yeah, okay. Come on.
Charles.
Sorry, can I just confirm?
We've
Sorry,
done a
Chanel.
lot, but the question of this rooftop railing, I'll call it,
Too big.
is a no-no, right? I mean, if we were modifying this building in the normal way, we would say denial of the rooftop railing. Is that correct?
Yes. It
Okay.
kind of looks like it's gonna fall off. It's just a little,
It's just,
I'm sure it's stable, but it looks.
no, but I mean, it's just,
Right, the way it looks is what
I
we're
don't know
talking
what
about.
happened
That's exactly
there.
what we're talking about.
And we want a proper termination there. And I think whatever modifications might be made, we're asking for a cornice and then look at the building just next door. The at the top of the white is a cornice. And we're asking for that between the
yes.
floor.
We should have the first floor read like a store, even if they have selling space upstairs. It's not the same.
Right, so that they're not equal in importance visually.
Yeah, doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and the idea of the lower floor, upper floor, rather than one great space just chopped in half to be 2 floors.
Right, exactly.
You can send it around.
Yeah, and you can send that around, Chenault, if, because I know there's just a lot of
I'm
ideas.
paralyzed to know what to write, but I'll figure it out.
Yeah, and, you can send it to everybody because, there are a lot of ideas swirling around.
Excuse me,
I'll
Chanel,
send it
can
to
I
you
just for
first, so I won't be
clarification?
embarrassed by my spelling for the others.
We're gonna go to the next one,
Wait,
right?
just for clarification on process, Chanel, can I just, you all are adopting a resolution, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so there was some discussion about not proceed. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. It's
No,
like
no,
there's
no,
there's a
we
lot
are,
of discussion.
yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Why would we not? Okay.
Okay, are we settled on this? I think I have enough combination of details and concept to write what we have to say.
Okay, great.
And with respect to the Charles Street, were the questions satisfied?
Well, I don't think it's gonna look very good. I have to be honest. I think those dividers are gonna be very heavy and clunky. And I think the idea is that it's supposed to look like steel windows. It's not supposed to look like fat aluminum windows. So it really breaks the illusion of the industrial windows. And also, I'm a little disappointed that he didn't try any other layout. That it was, these square, they're almost square, 2'2" and 2'4" or something. windows when it looks so much more elegant when it's rectangular.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he didn't show that. I asked him if he had done any other sketches. He didn't know about any. And it would have been nice, even if we agreed with him afterwards that he had the right solution. But these are really fat muttons.
Very, very much so.
A typical wood
So
one.
could we
7,
overall
8.
ask for more rectangular shaped panes? Do you call them panes or divisions? What's the best word, Anita?
What was the first word you used?
More rectangular panes or divisions?
Panes, lights is what they're called. Lights, if you want to call it that.
Light.
Lights or windows. Yeah, lights. That's what I call them. Maybe nobody else does. Sort of like if you have 2/2 or 6/6, it's the number of panes. And these are true panes. These are really divided lights.
Yeah, they are.
But in general, that it's the lights that should be more rectangular within the
Well,
opening.
rectangular meaning up, down, not
Okay.
left, right. In my opinion, I think it makes it look better, more elegant.
I agree, and I would also add that the examples that he showed he showed Steve Cohen's empty mansion, that they do not divide up those lights as much as in this particular example on Charles. So I really don't think it's been translated accurately. And I think that a better proportion of the lights, not quite so many small ones, would be my comment.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, we were told that the inspiration was, this industrial inspiration. And yet the example was of this mansion, this contemporary mansion on Perry Street. So it wasn't, the reference wasn't, an
I have to-
industrial building.
Well, and the really ultimate industrial adaptation or the modern industrial look is the building between 10th and Perry down by the river, 10th and Charles down by the river. That huge building.
Right.
It's just industrial to death with all.
I mean, Charles on the Charles apartments, modern. Those are very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Well, it doesn't read as steel, and that's a big problem because it's fooling nobody. And it should look like steel if that's the image that they want.
Right. I
And
agree.
could that be achieved with paint with the examples we've seen?
Well, could be achieved with a little more work, like at least try out some different options so that the dividers aren't so fat. I don't know, maybe there's other companies that can make it narrower, but 2 inches is clunky.
That sounds clunky.
It is clunky. And I've seen the mistake done before, so it won't be the first time. But it never does look good. And it takes away from what the beauty of it is, which is thin muttons.
Yeah, I agree. It really honestly feels like somebody saw a window in a catalog that they liked and they're trying to retrofit a window
right.
page in a catalog to a building instead of look at the building and see what makes sense and find the window that suits the building.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, not so good, but
And the windows that are there are clearly a pre-designation modernizing of the whole thing rather than respecting the.
no, and look, it's not a gorgeous building or anything. Why not make the windows great?
Could be better. It could be.
Yeah, I think we could bring it up a little. And we're talking about aesthetics.
Right, of course.
So
And in the end, this is not an interpretation of industrial windows.
Well, maybe, but it's not, depends on who's looking at it, I guess.
It doesn't reflect
Yeah,
industrial windows.
it doesn't, not really, no. It would be a sad stepchild.
And that's not a Victorian point you can much argue about. It's absolute hard, clean lines in correct proportion.
Okay, thank you. This
Are
was,
there other questions, or
I don't think
is
so.
everyone exhausted?
yeah,
So,
thank you. We want to be helpful too.
A reminder that next week we have a very big project of the Canal Street and Broadway.
next week,
A new building essentially on top of.
Next meeting.
Oh, nice.
oh, next meeting,
movie theater.
next month, not next week. You scared me there.
Next month,
So weekly.
Back to back to
meeting,
back.
next time. And that will be on the Monday as this one has been. So I can't believe there was no public comment on this building.
Surprising, very surprising.
no. I
Were
think
there,
we took
were there many
care of
public
it.
people here I didn't see?
I think we covered it though. We spoke for them all.
Susan, were there a lot of people from the public here? Did you notice?
Not that many, no.
There are probably like, or,
8?
yeah, 8 or 9, yeah, online.
But because there's so many people in Soho who are always right on it. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
And you don't have to come next week, Anita. It could be next month. You gotta rest. I'll get this as soon as I can and pass it through Susan because time is pressing by Thursday.
Okay, very good.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Good night.
Think we can